Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Lieutenant Josh Johnson with the 115th Fighter Wing. And today what we're going to discuss is the premise behind our resource management template, and where it comes from, what it needs to do, and the purpose for the automated process that you're going to follow along to. Now, in all the follow-on videos, you're going through the actual pointy clicky and how you're divulging the information from the individual systems, extracting it out, creating your data connections, and creating an automated tool that's easily replicated and used by multiple users. The benefit to this is it saves immense amount of time when you're collecting your data, in that all it's going to take is a simple download from each system, a quick refresh, and it's going to put things in light of where you want to be. For it stands right now, when you're running your daily status of funds in typical dual processing fashion, you're looking at, I know there's ones out there still using CRIS to define all of your data, and that's an acceptable means with the tools that are currently provided to you. What they want us to do is keep the hot information hot and the cold information cold, so DEAMS data directly from DEAMS, CRIS data directly for BQ. And that's easily done. Combining that information, yes, there's the TechSouth tool that's available out there. It's run from an STH perspective and consolidated. It's convenient. And the problem is that you're relying on someone else to be the go-between for your data set. That may or may not be there in the future. Say, hypothetically, the contract ends in, in February, March of next year, and it's not renewed. Now your reliance is gone. This type of tool teaches you the capabilities that you need to be able to provide that data on your own. So let's take a look at what the reports would typically look like in your standard fashion. So what we have here is we have the CRIS export from a regular status of funds perspective. And what we end up with is a lot of raw data that we would either do one of two things with. One, we would filter out and try and scroll down. We would create a pivot table from this every day when we exported it. We don't have InfoMaker anymore. Some of you may have CRIS query set up in cubes so that when you run it on your screen, it looks the way that you want to identify it. And that's great. It's quick, it's simple, it's easy, but it's not continuous. It doesn't allow you to continually update that data and to share it across other users. You're also reliant on an internet connection at all times for your most recent status of funds. So what we have here is we have all of our objective data for the non-SFIS lines of accounting, the legacy-based lines of accounting, which walk us through all of the balance identifiers. Now notice I've only run this for ADSN 667100 because I want to run my BQ data out of CRIS and my DEAMS data out of DEAMS. So we would have all of this data, and then if we come in here and we want to bring in our DEAMS status of funds, what we end up with is another Excel workbook that looks very similar to this. And now, as we've all been aware, DEAMS has a much more expansive status of funds as far as columns and data sets. So what we end up with is funds all the way across through contingency codes, all the way through our reimbursement accounting, because as there's no TOA in DEAMS, the R fund is different type of accounting, which has its pluses and its minuses, and it keeps going on and on and on and on and on, all the way across to where you end up finding out, hey, look, we have an LOB for Strategic National and Theater Defense. Didn't know what that 1030000 meant for a long time. So here we are with two different statuses of funds, but this just gives us that macro level, that PSR level in legacy, or the fund level information, PATEO level information in DEAMS. What we also need to know every day is how that information got there. We've run a daily audit list, we run an STH, we run all of those different data sets. But what if we could bring in the STH or GL perspective into a product to always see what data is there? So what we end up with here is this is just a CRIS STH. It's run for the full fiscal year with no CivPay or PCV. My CivPay we manage in a different tool, so I don't need it here. But what it shows is every document number for the entire calendar date of 2016, fiscal year 2016, for any fiscal year that impacted it. So I want to be able to see if 2014 data got paid out or 2015 data was deobligated. I want to see those transactions flow through. We have removed out line builds, line kills, and memo do out transactions, as those don't go through here. But as you can see, what we still have to end up with is we still have to do a lot of research based on document number, PC code, post code to try and lay it across, and it's not the easiest means to lay that out. Now, this is very easily done in a pivot table, but do you want to create a pivot table from scratch every time you run this transactional data to make sure that your data gets put in the right area? We also wanted to take a look at the Deems GL, and go back and see some other videos for a full explanation of the Deems GL, but know that GLACs are now the term, or general ledger accounting codes, are now the terms to help us identify the stages of accounting that are affected. Bids and stages of accounting and postcodes and legacy all affected the general ledger in the same way. We just never were privy to what those general ledger accounting codes and how those transactions actually conspired on the T ledger. So what we end up with is a bunch of numbers now instead of letters. So 461.000.90031 and 455.000.90021. Before, we used to just see G and H. Pretty easy. But we need to be able to correspond that. And if you don't understand that 4701 starts as a commitment, 4801 is a UOO, 4901 is an AEU, and 4902 is an AEP, you're not going to be able to see that transactional data flow. The other difference in the Deems GL versus the CRIS is definitely between reference 1, reference 4, and reference 5. Those are those little ellipses, those ... those extra value fields that are in each type of budgetary, proprietary, balancing, payment type of transaction. So reference 4 is not always a document number. Reference 5 is not always a document number. Reference 1 is not always useful in our transactions. So as something flows across, and watch the other video for more detail, you need to be able to decipher exactly what that transaction is. A 4902 GLAC payment, for example, doesn't have a document number associated to it. It has an invoice number and a check number. Well, I would like to know what PO or what document that actually affected. Running it like this doesn't help. Even if you create a pivot table, you're going to have segmented information and going to have to really break it down by PTEO. So what do? We go out and we find other helper reports, and that can help. One report we like to bring in is the commitment to obligation. It gives us every requisition, the requisition description for it, and what PO that requisition was linked to. That's a very useful report so that we can track from PR to PO and PO back to PR in a simplified format. Another one that's really nice to bring back in, when I talked about that 4901 and 4902, you lose that information, you get an invoice number. Well, now we're able to bring in an invoice back to a PO, and that back to a PO number also will be able to provide us with a DOV, or voucher number. So now we have all of our data sets that are required that are not in the GL when we want to do our 1081s or 1080s or 1017s, or we just want to confirm that a payment was valid and made. So we have these three reports that you typically have to go back and forth, Control F, and find. But now we're going to look at how we can bring those in together. So what we're going to end up with when we're all said and done is we end up with giving you a dashboard. To start, it's going to tell us what different PTEOs we want to use, because what we're going to give you the capability to do is define your PTEOs, both legacy and Deems. Tell us what they are, by commodity type, by sub-RC, by RCM, by sub-commodity. That way you have a no-kidding way to look at what data you're looking for. So for here, just a benefit of having the data already in the tool, you want to see what 40924 equals, enter 40924 and hit enter. Now you're going to end up with the OC that comes, and you're going to end up with a no data given. So you want to end up with an EEC, or an OC back to an EEC, 2603312, boom, we all know that's GPC purchases now, 61950. It ends up giving us that same number that we've been looking for so long. So we can go back, oh, you know what, that isn't actually one, so what do we need to do? Then we go back and we say, alright, well, what about 63900, what's that? Oh, there we go. And we can go back and forth between, if we didn't know the other, it's there. This will give us all the different data. The next tab is going to be our PTEO definition. You're going to go through, and through data validation steps, you are going to define by commodity type what this information is. It'll come in very handy. Now, we just showed you that BQ status of funds. right here, where you're going to have to go through and scroll and find all of that data. Well, what this allows us to do is it allows us to make it look very similar to that. And now once we end up with our BQ status of funds, you can see that we're going to look at fund code by the funds control level, by what type of commodity, and we're going to get it all the way across. This is data that's not readily available when we just run the data. Now then we come back here to the deem status of funds, and we're going to look at the exact same process except in a slightly different way, because we want to look at our D fund and our R fund separate. Remember, because BQ has TOA, so direct and reimbursable are all under the same process. But here, they're not. So we want to keep looking at that data sets all the way across. Now, that BQSTH that I showed you, that perspective, well, here we go. We're going to bring in a potato because we've already defined it. We have our subcommodity that's already defined by our document number and go across. Now remember that we're going to end up with document numbers that are requisitions and POs, and they're going to lose identity as they go across, because as they lose identity, there's no way to link them back with that data. There's nothing real fancy that we do with this. It's just an easy way to look at how things flow across. But the Deems GL is where the real magic starts to happen. So let's take, for example, that we're going to use our raw data again and try and research just my KP and subsistence contract. So what we end up with is we end up with this data for our entire STH for the fiscal year. Notice that we end up with all of our different GLACs as we go across, and this is just because I filtered out by the potato. I know that it's 258.1101. I know there's no ESP code associated with it. It's the only thing I use for those identifying remarks. So as we go through, we'll be able to see, oh, there's our target loads associated with it. There's some movement that we've had because of it. We have our commitment documents. We have our UOO. We have our AEU for 4802s right up here. And then our payments, our 4901s. There's our UO or our AEUs, and here goes our AEPs for payments. And so notice that as we go over, we're going to start to see that, yep, there's our payments, because the vendor always becomes reference one. There's our requisition adjustments. There's some numbers that are there, and there's the adjustments to the PO. As you go over here to reference 4 and 5, we start to see that, okay, there's our document loads. Here we have some collection data. Then we come back up here, and now notice that all these payments don't give us a requisition number like the rec gave us, or like the PO adjustments gave us, where they gave us the actual contract number. So we want to be able to bring that back in. Now we would have to go out and do some research to figure out exactly where our DOV was if we needed it. With our new tool, and when you're done with all today, this is what your new process would look like with the same KP subsistence contract. You're going to see where your target loads and adjustments were as they go down by date. And then you're going to see what your requisitions occurred when they were here. Now notice, because this requisition did not tie to a PO, and there's no PO field here, this did not tie to a PO because it was made and then canceled. It never actually went to a purchase order. It was just there. But now we can see that we have 3 different Form 9s, the original, the Mod 1, and Mod 2, that all linked back to the right PO. So everything was done correctly. It flowed from commitment over to O, and then you can see the payments as they flowed over all the way here through paid, and what they ended up with was DOVs all the way across. So now I can easily and quickly research that document information. And just to be fair, we threw in Workday so we could make sure it was a Workday management report. We're going to give you your total officer and enlisted issued days that you have loaded, so it's a quick, easy funding document to check on your Workday document on that back tab for totals. And then we're going to be able to go straight down through your WUCs by Work Center through ADSN, and you can alter these as much as you need to. So there's an exasperated benefit to what we're going to teach you in the upcoming videos. Please take your time to watch them, come to class, call me, or ask any questions you may have, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.